Is this some kind of joke, lady? The question, sharp and laced with derision, cut through the humid afternoon air. Corporal Miller, young, cocky, and crisp in his uniform, leaned against the guard shack at the main gate of Fort Hamilton. His mirrored sunglasses hid his eyes, but not his contempt. His partner, Private Davies, younger still and eager to impress, snickered beside him. "License and registration," Miller demanded, his voice impatient. He made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "And I need you to step off the bike, ma'am." The ma'am was delivered with exaggerated courtesy that was somehow more insulting than outright rudeness, a verbal pat on the head for a woman playing dress-up. Victoria moved with deliberate precision that seemed to irritate the young corporal. She reached into the leather saddlebag, her movements economical and exact, and produced a slim leather wallet. From it she extracted a driver's license and a peculiar-looking identification card. It was an unusual design, laminated plastic with security features that looked outdated, the photo showing a younger version of herself with the same penetrating gaze. She handed them over without a word. Miller snatched the cards from her hand. He glanced at the driver's license, then let out a short, barking laugh as he examined the other ID. "Victoria Hayes," he read aloud, turning to Davis. "And what's this supposed to be?" He squinted at the strange card. "Says here you're cleared for." "Well, it doesn't actually say. Just a bunch of codes and clearance levels. Looks like something you printed off Pinterest, sweetheart." Behind Victoria, a line of cars had begun to form. The first driver, a civilian contractor in a pickup truck, honked his horn impatiently. The sound seemed to feed Miller's arrogance. He was the king of this small concrete kingdom, and he was putting on a show. "Sir, I have an appointment," Victoria said, her voice low and calm. It was the first time she'd spoken. The voice was steady, measured, and held an undercurrent of authority that was entirely at odds with her youth and appearance.
"An appointment,"
Miller scoffed, pocketing the IDs. "With who? The base spa?" Davies snickered at the joke. "The Intelligence Archive Director." Miller's smirk widened. "Look, I don't have time for this. This isn't a biker rally, Princess. This is a secure military installation. Why don't you turn this pretty little bike around and go find the nearest Starbucks?" He stepped forward and placed a hand on the gleaming chrome of the Indian's fuel tank, his fingerprints smudging the polished surface. "Nice bike for a girl. Bet Daddy bought it for you." "Please don't touch my motorcycle," Victoria said. The words were quiet, but something in her tone, a razor-sharp edge beneath the calm, made the temperature seem to drop. For the first time, Miller noticed something dangerous flash in her gray eyes. He saw it, and his ego took it as a challenge. He smirked and gave the handlebars a slight shove, making the heavy bike rock on its stand. "Or what? You going to file a complaint? Call corporate?" The line of cars was longer now. Several people had gotten out, their cell phones raised, recording the confrontation. The scene was becoming a public spectacle. Two uniformed soldiers harassing a young woman at a military checkpoint. The injustice of it hung thick in the air. "I'm going to have to ask you again to get off the bike," Miller said, his voice hardening. He was losing control of the situation and doubling down on his aggression to regain it. "You're causing a disturbance and failing to obey the instructions of a gate sentry. That gives me grounds to detain you." Victoria's eyes drifted from Miller to a small, worn leather pouch secured to her belt. It was simple and unassuming black leather, cracked and faded, with a barely visible insignia stamped into its surface. Miller's gaze followed hers. "What's in there? Your makeup? A purse you bought at some military surplus store to look cool?" The insult hung in the air, but Victoria's mind was no longer at the gate. For a fleeting second, the image of Corporal Miller was replaced by another face, a woman's face, pale and slick with rain, in a safe house in Eastern Europe decades ago. A younger Victoria, her face streaked with mud and blood, knelt beside a fallen operative. The woman, barely 30, was pressing a similar leather pouch, new and dark then, into her hand. "Don't let them forget us, Vic," her partner whispered, her voice a wet rattle. "Don't let any of this be for nothing." On the pouch was the insignia of a phantom unit, a special operations group so classified its members were ghosts, their names stricken from official records before they even entered the field. It was the crest of the Ghost Reconnaissance Unit. Back in the present, Victoria's hand instinctively went to the pouch at her belt. A wave of profound sadness washed over her face, a private grief that was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same unshakable calm. The pouch wasn't a fashion accessory. It was a tombstone for operatives who never got one. It was a promise she'd kept for 15 years. Miller, oblivious, saw only a young woman lost in a daydream. "That's it," he declared, reaching for his radio. "I'm calling this in. We've got a possible security concern. some Instagram influencer trying to sneak onto post. He decided to run the ID more for the theatricality of it than anything else. He strode into the guard shack, holding the card up for Davies to see with a theatrical eye roll. Let's see what the system says about our secret agent Barbie here. He slid the card into the scanner. In the third car back, Captain Maria Flores gripped her steering wheel, her knuckles white. She was off duty, on her way to the commissary, but she'd seen enough. She was a third-generation soldier, and her grandmother had carried herself with that same quiet dignity, that same look of someone who had seen too much and said too little. Everything about this felt wrong. The young corporal's blatant disrespect, the casual sexism, the mockery was an offense to the uniform she wore. When Miller's taunts escalated to physical intimidation and the baseless accusation of a security threat, she knew she couldn't just sit and watch. Intervening directly would be messy. Jurisdiction issues, rank complications, but there were other ways. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. She didn't call the base commander or the MPs. That would be too slow, too bureaucratic. She called the one person on the base who could move mountains with a single word, Garrison Command Sergeant Major Evans. He was her former first sergeant, a man who'd forgotten more about the Army than most generals ever learned. He answered on the second ring. Evans? Sergeant Major? It's Captain Flores. I'm at the main gate. Her voice was low and urgent. The MPs are harassing a female veteran, making a public spectacle of her, accusing her of having a fake ID, mocking her. It's a disgrace. Corporal Miller is about to detain her. What's the woman's name? They just ran her ID. I heard Miller say it. Victoria Hayes, Hayes. The other end of the line went completely silent for 3 full seconds. When Evans spoke again, his voice was tight with a kind of cold horror that made the hair on Flores's arms stand up. Captain, stay where you are. Do not engage. Do not interfere. Just keep your eyes on Miss Hayes. Is she all right? She's fine, just calm. But they're about to put hands on her. They won't, Evans said, his voice a low growl of absolute certainty. Flores could hear muffled shouting in the background on his end, a sense of sudden explosive urgency. Get me the general's aide on the line now, Evans bellowed to someone in his office. Tell him it's code black. No, I'm not kidding. Just do it. The call ended. Flores lowered her phone, her heart pounding. Code black, she'd never even heard of that designation. It wasn't in any manual she'd ever read. She looked at the young woman on the motorcycle, who now seemed to be surrounded by an invisible lethal aura. The balance of power at the gate had just shifted dramatically. Help wasn't just on the way. The entire world was about to turn upside down for Corporal Miller. The scene flashed to General Thompson's stately office. The general, a man whose stern reputation was known throughout the Army, was deep in a high-level briefing with Pentagon officials displayed on a large screen. His aide, a young lieutenant, burst through the door, his face ashen. He broke every rule of military protocol, walking directly to the general's desk and placing a small folded note beside his hand. Thompson shot him a look that could curdle milk, but the aide just tapped the note insistently and stepped back. Annoyed, Thompson unfolded it. He read the 2 words written inside, Victoria Hayes. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. General Thompson froze, all color drained from his face. He stared at the name as if it were a ghost from a war most people didn't know had been fought. The formidable 4-star general on the screen was still talking, but Thompson no longer heard him. He looked up at his aide, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something that looked like fear. He leaned into his microphone. This meeting is terminated, he announced, his voice flat and void of emotion. The officials on the screen began to protest. Thompson cut them off. A national security asset requires my immediate attention. He killed the connection, plunging the room into silence. Then he exploded into action. Get my vehicle. Now, he roared at the aide. Scramble the post honor guard. I want a full detail and dress uniform. Alert the provost marshal. Tell him to meet me at the main gate in 5 minutes. And God help anyone who gets in my way. The aide scrambled to execute the orders, the sheer unprecedented urgency fueling his panic. The name Victoria Hayes had just become the most important thing in the world. About a month later, Victoria was sitting in a quiet corner of a local coffee shop off-post, reviewing classified documents on an encrypted tablet. The door opened, and in walked Miller, dressed in civilian clothes. He saw Victoria and froze, a look of apprehension on his face. He looked different, humbled, quieter. The arrogant swagger was completely gone. Victoria caught his eye and gave a slight nod toward the empty chair across from her. Sit down, Corporal. Miller hesitated, then walked over and slid into the seat. He sat in silence, staring at his hands on the tabletop. "Ma'am," he began, his voice low and choked with sincerity. "I wanted to apologize, for real this time, not because a general told me to." He finally looked up, his eyes filled with genuine shame that hadn't been there before. "We've been listening to these veterans, the things they did, the things they saw, the women who served in silence because no one believed they could. I had no idea. I never knew." Victoria took a slow sip of her coffee. She placed the cup down gently. "Now you do," she said, and for the first time a small, genuine smile touched the corners of her lips. "And that's all that matters." They sat together in comfortable silence, a legendary operative and a young soldier sharing coffee as the lesson, truly and deeply, was finally learned. The story of what happened at the main gate of Fort Hamilton became an instant legend. It spread through the base, then through the digital grapevine to the entire military. General Thompson, true to his word and Victoria's request, showed a different kind of strength. Corporal Miller and Private Davies were not court-martialed or discharged. Their punishment was far more instructive. They were reassigned to run the base's new Veteran Dignity Initiative. For the next 6 months, their full-time duty was to personally welcome and escort veterans and their families who came to visit the post. They spent their days not checking IDs, but listening. They heard stories of Normandy, of Chosin Reservoir, of the Ayadrang Valley, of Fallujah. They pushed wheelchairs, carried bags, and sat for hours listening to women and men who looked unassuming recount deeds of incredible courage. They were also tasked with creating a new mandatory training module for all gate security personnel across every branch of service. It was officially titled Protocols for Dignitary and Veteran Entry, but everyone called it the Hayes Protocol. It was a course in de-escalation, observation, and above all, respect. Back in the present, General Thompson finally understood. It wasn't a keepsake, it was a memorial, a sacred duty. He looked at Victoria Hayes with a new, deeper level of awe. He nodded slowly. "Your wisdom is noted, ma'am. They will be taught." He was a young captain again, standing in a secure briefing room in Langley. A charismatic, brilliant operative named Elena Keller, the woman who would later die in a safe house in Prague, was briefing him. She'd tapped an identical pouch on her own belt. "This holds our luck, Captain," Keller had said with a wry smile. "And it holds the names of the operatives who didn't have any. We carry it for them, always." "General, a word." Thompson's entire demeanor shifted instantly from fury to deference. "Of course, Miss Hayes, anything." Victoria walked slowly until she stood before the two young men. "Corporal," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle as she addressed Miller. "Arrogance is a heavy burden. It makes you feel powerful in the moment, but it blinds you to what matters. The uniform doesn't make the soldier. The heart does. You need to remember that." She then turned her calm eyes to the sobbing Private Davies. "You'll learn," she said softly. "Fear of doing the wrong thing is a better compass than the pride of doing what feels right. Choose your leaders more wisely next time." Finally, she looked back at General Thompson. "Don't ruin their careers, General. They're children. They made a mistake. Teach them. That's the stronger way." General Thompson looked at Victoria with pure reverence. His gaze drifted down to the worn leather pouch at her belt. Is that Agent Keller's pouch, ma'am?" he asked, his voice suddenly thick with emotion. Victoria touched the pouch gently. "It is," she confirmed quietly. For a moment, the scene at the gate dissolved for the general. General Thompson's voice grew even more intense. "This woman is not just a veteran. She is a living legend. She is a national treasure, and she was treated like a common criminal. Mocked, humiliated, physically detained at the gate of a base she helped protect countless times over." The general's speech finished, and the silence that followed was heavy and profound. Finally, he turned his burning gaze upon Miller and Davies. The full, focused power of his fury was terrible to behold. "Corporal Miller, Private Davies." His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. "You are a disgrace to that uniform. You are an insult to every soldier who has ever served with honor. You saw a young woman and you saw someone you could belittle. You did not see the giant on whose shoulders you stand." He turned to the provost marshal. "Colonel, take them into custody. I want them brought up on every conceivable charge under the Uniform Code of Military Justice: conduct unbecoming, failure to show respect, dereliction of duty. Find every article that applies. I want them to be an example." Two hulking military policemen stepped forward to escort the terrified young guards away. Miller refused to look up, his eyes fixed on the pavement in utter shame. Davies was openly weeping, tears streaming down his face. But as the MPs reached for them, Victoria raised a hand, lean and strong. The provost marshal stepped forward, holding a tablet computer. At a nod from the general, he began to speak, but Thompson raised a hand, stopping him. The general turned to address the entire assembly. His own men, the stunned onlookers, and most pointedly, the two disgraced gate guards. For those of you who do not know, the general began, his voice ringing with authority, the woman you see before you is Victoria Hayes. He paused, letting the weight of the name settle. The identification card that this corporal, he spat the word like a curse, dismissed as fake, is a Level 1 legacy clearance card. It is a designation that has not been active for 30 years. It bypasses our standard systems because the system itself and most of the people who operate it are not cleared to know who she is. He let the statement hang in the air, the implications sinking in. The crowd was utterly silent, phones still recording, capturing every historic word. Captain Flores, standing by her car, felt tears welling in her eyes. Miss Hayes, the general continued, his voice resonating with deep, reverent respect, was a founding field operative for the Ghost Reconnaissance Unit during the final decade of the Cold War and the subsequent classified operations that followed. A unit so secret the United States government denied its very existence until 2018. A collective gasp went through the crowd. She operated for years in hostile territory, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, alone, with no support and no chance of rescue if captured. Her actions, documented in files that will remain sealed for another 75 years, single-handedly prevented at least 4 separate incidents that would have led to catastrophic international conflicts. Miller's face had gone from pale to a ghastly, bloodless white. She holds the Intelligence Star, 2 Defense Superior Service Medals, and a Presidential Medal of Freedom that was awarded in a classified ceremony, a medal that officially does not exist. General Thompson. He stepped out, his face a thundercloud of controlled rage. His eyes swept over the scene. The composed young woman, the arrogant corporal with his hand still on her, the gawking crowd, and they narrowed into slits of cold fury. Miller and Davies were frozen, their minds unable to process the sheer scale of the response. Miller's hand was still clamped on Victoria's arm, a fact that seemed to burn under the general's gaze. General Thompson strode forward, his polished boots eating up the pavement. He walked past the provost marshal, past the petrified young guards, past the honor guards standing at perfect attention. He ignored Miller as if he were invisible. His entire focus was on the young woman who had now, with fluid grace, dismounted from her motorcycle. The general stopped precisely 3 feet from Victoria Hayes. He drew himself up to his full height, back going ramrod straight. Then he snapped the single sharpest, most impeccably respectful salute of his entire decorated career. Miss Hayes, General Thompson's voice boomed, clear and powerful, across the now silent gate area. On behalf of the United States Army, I apologize for the reception you have received at Fort Hamilton. It is an absolute honor to have you here, ma'am. Victoria looked at the saluting general, the honor guard, the entire chaotic scene that had erupted around her. She gave a slow, measured nod of acknowledgement, returning the salute with perfect military precision. It's all right, General, she said, her voice carrying easily in the stillness. They're just young. They don't understand. The crowd gasped. A line had been crossed. The moment his fingers closed around Victoria's arm, an irreversible chain of events was set in motion. It was then that the sirens started. They were not the familiar wail of local police cars, but the piercing, multi-tone scream of a full military police escort. From inside the base, 3 black SUVs with flashing lights came screaming down the main road, weaving through traffic with terrifying speed. They screeched to a halt in perfect tactical formation, their vehicles boxing in the entire scene at the gate. They were followed immediately by 2 armored MP Humvees and a command vehicle, which slammed to a stop behind them. Doors flew open with military precision. A dozen soldiers from the Fort Hamilton Honor Guard, immaculate in their dress blue uniforms with gleaming white gloves and rifles, poured out. They moved with silent, practiced efficiency, forming 2 perfect lines that created a corridor leading from the lead SUV. The provost marshal, a grim-faced lieutenant colonel, leaped from his own vehicle, eyes already scanning for the threat. But no one was looking at him. All eyes were on the man who emerged from the central black SUV. Back at the gate, Miller was having his moment of triumph. The scanner in the guard shack let out a dismissive beep and flashed a red screen. Invalid credential. No record found. See? Miller said, strutting out of the shack. He held Victoria's ID card between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a piece of trash. Fake. Told you. He flicked the card dismissively. It fluttered through the air and landed on the dusty pavement at Victoria's feet. Victoria did not bend to pick it up. She didn't even look at it. Her gaze was fixed on Miller, her expression unreadable. This quiet defiance enraged the young corporal. "That's it. I've had enough of this charade," Miller declared, his voice rising, playing to the crowd. "You are a potential security risk, impersonating whatever it is you think you are. You're being detained for questioning." He unsnapped the retention strap on his holster, a purely theatrical gesture. "Get off the bike. Hands behind your back. Now." Private Davies, who'd been watching with growing unease, finally found his voice. "Corporal, maybe we should just call the shift sergeant. This is—" "Quiet, Private," Miller snapped, high on his own power. He closed the distance and reached for Victoria's arm. "Let's go, lady." Inside the Garrison Command building, Command Sergeant Major Evans stood ramrod straight. The phone receiver gripped so tightly in his fist it creaked. His face, usually a stern but fair mask, was now a portrait of disbelief and cold fury. He was already on a second line, connected directly to the office of the base commander, General Thompson. "I don't care if he's in a secure video conference with the Joint Chiefs," Evans barked at the general's terrified young aide. "You walk into that room, place a note in front of him, and you do not leave until he reads it. The name is Victoria Hayes. She is at the main gate being unlawfully detained by Corporal Miller and Private Davies. Go now." The story of Victoria Hayes is a powerful reminder that heroes don't always look the way we expect them to. If her story of quiet valor moved you, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Veterans Past Stories for more tales of the unsung heroes who walk among us.